The morning came soft through the kitchen window, filtering golden through the curtains his mother had sewn 40 years ago. The farmer stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm, while he stared out at the land he'd known his entire life. 50 years old, and some mornings he still felt like that boy who'd followed his father through these same fields, learning to read the weather in the way the wind moved through the grass. The house was quiet. It had been quiet for a long time now, 3 years since his father had passed peacefully in his sleep, 2 years since his mother had followed 6 months later, as if she couldn't bear to be apart from him any longer. The farmer had inherited not just the land, but the silence that came with it. A silence that was sometimes peaceful, sometimes lonely, always vast. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, and decided to drive into town. Thursdays were his day for errands: feed store, hardware shop, maybe lunch at the diner if he felt like company. Small rituals that marked the passage of time, that kept him connected to the world beyond his property line. The drive took 20 minutes. Windows down, radio playing low. Country songs about heartbreak and highways, the soundtrack of rural life. He parked on Main Street, nodded to a few familiar faces, and realized he had an hour to spare before the feed store opened. The coffee shop on the corner looked inviting, its windows fogged with warmth against the cool October morning. He rarely went there. It was usually full of younger people with laptops and headphones, but today something drew him in. The moment he stepped inside, he understood why he usually avoided it. The place was packed, voices overlapping in a constant hum of conversation, the espresso machine hissing and grinding, music playing from speakers mounted in the corners. It was too much noise, too much energy for his quiet morning mood. He was about to leave when he saw her. She sat alone at a small table near the back, her hands moving in quick, fluid gestures that he recognized immediately as sign language. She was speaking to no one, or rather practicing, her lips moving silently as her hands shaped words in the air. She looked frustrated, her brow furrowed, and she kept glancing toward the counter, where the line of customers had grown long. The farmer watched as she gathered her courage and approached the barista, a young man with elaborate tattoos and an impatient expression. The woman pointed to the menu board, then made a gesture, a simple motion that anyone should have understood meant small or one. But the barista just stared at her blankly. "What?" he said too loud, as if volume would bridge the communication gap. She tried again, more slowly, her hands forming clear shapes. The farmer could see her embarrassment growing, her shoulders hunching inward as people in line behind her began to shift impatiently. The barista shook his head. "I don't understand, can you just write it down?" The woman's face flushed red. She fumbled for her phone, trying to type something, but her hands were shaking now. Someone behind her in line sighed audibly, and she flinched as if she'd been struck. The farmer moved without thinking. He stepped up beside her, gently touching her elbow to get her attention. When she turned to him, startled and defensive, he smiled softly and raised his hands. "Can I help?" He signed. The movement slow but clear. Her eyes went wide. For a moment she just stared at him as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Then her hands flew up in response, signing so fast he had to ask her to slow down. "Sorry," she signed, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I just want coffee. Medium latte. They don't understand." The farmer turned to the barista. "She'd like a medium latte, please." "Oh." The young man looked embarrassed now. "Yeah, okay. Sorry, I didn't know what she wanted." The farmer paid for both their drinks before the woman could protest, then guided her back to her table. She sat down heavily, her hands trembling as she signed her gratitude. "Thank you. You don't know how much that means." "I think I do." He signed back. He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" She nodded, still looking slightly shocked, and he sat down across from her. "My name is John." He signed. "But most people call me Farmer." She smiled slightly at that, and some of the tension left her face. "I'm Claire, and I can't believe you know sign language. No one here does. I've been trying for weeks." "My younger brother was deaf." He signed. We all learned when we were kids. It was just part of life. Was? He passed away when we were teenagers. Car accident. The farmer paused, then added, "But I never forgot how to sign. Couldn't if I tried." Claire's expression softened with understanding and sympathy. "I'm sorry. But I'm grateful he taught you. You're the first person in this town who's understood me without me having to explain myself." The barista called out their orders, and the farmer retrieved both drinks. When he set Claire's latte in front of her, she wrapped her hands around it like it was precious. "How long have you been here?" He signed. 2 months. I moved for a job at the county office. They were excited to hire me, said they valued diversity, but outside of work it's been... She paused, searching for the right sign. Isolating. No one makes the effort. They either ignore me or treat me like I'm somehow less capable because I can't hear. The farmer knew that feeling, though in a different context. The way people sometimes treated farmers as simple or backwards, as if working the land meant you couldn't think deeply or feel complexly. "I understand," and he signed. People fear what's different. It's easier to dismiss than to try. Claire studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. "You're different," she signed. "Why?" He thought about how to answer that. "Because I know what it's like to be lonely, and I know that connection, real connection, is rare enough that when you have the chance to offer it, you should." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she was smiling. "That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in a long time." They sat together for over an hour, their conversation flowing in the silent language of hands and expressions. She told him about growing up deaf in a hearing family who'd loved her but hadn't always understood her, about the challenges of navigating a world designed for people who could hear, about the constant exhaustion of advocating for herself, of having to prove her competence over and over. He told her about the farm, about the peace he found in working with the land, about his own loneliness, and the way silence could be both comfort and burden. And slowly as they talked, something shifted. A recognition passed between them, a understanding that they'd both been searching for connection and had somehow, improbably, found it in a crowded coffee shop on a Thursday morning. "Would you like to see the farm?" He signed as they finally prepared to leave. "It's quiet there, peaceful. Might be a nice change from town." Claire hesitated, and he could see her weighing the offer, stranger danger against the desperate need for friendship, for someone who understood. "I don't want to impose," she signed. "You wouldn't be. I'd enjoy the company." She smiled then, genuine and warm. "Okay, yes, I'd love that." They drove separately, Claire following his truck out of town and onto the rural roads that led to his property. The farmer watched her in his rearview mirror, this woman he'd known for barely 2 hours, but who already felt like someone significant, someone who mattered. When they arrived, he gave her the full tour, the fields and the barn, the chicken coop and the vegetable garden his mother had planted that he still maintained. Claire was fascinated by everything, asking questions, touching the rough wood of the fence posts, laughing silently when one of the chickens pecked at her shoe. "It's beautiful," she signed when they finally stood on the porch looking out over the valley. "So peaceful. I can see why you love it." "It's home," he signed simply, "the only one I've ever known." They sat together on the porch swing, moving gently back and forth, and the farmer realized he felt more at ease than he had in years. There was something about communicating in sign language that felt intimate, intentional. Every word was deliberate, every expression mattered. There was no casual background noise, no throwaway comments, just clear, purposeful connection. "Can I ask you something?" Claire signed after a while. "Of course." "Why aren't you married? A man like you, kind, patient, with all this." She gestured at the farm. "It seems like you'd have people lining up." The farmer smiled slightly. "I was engaged once, long time ago." She wanted city life, wanted excitement and constant stimulation. "I wanted this." He gestured at the land around them. We weren't compatible. And since then, I guess I haven't found anyone who understood. Understood what? That silence isn't empty. That quiet can be full. That sometimes the most important conversations happen without words. Claire's hands stilled, and she looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You really believe that? I do. My brother taught me that. He showed me that communication isn't about sound, it's about connection, about paying attention, about being present. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting in her lap. Then she signed slowly, carefully. I think I've been waiting my whole life for someone to understand that. The weeks that followed felt like falling, in the best possible way. Claire came to the farm every weekend, arriving Friday evening and staying through Sunday afternoon. They fell into an easy rhythm, cooking meals together, working in the garden, taking long walks through the property. They communicated primarily in sign language, even when writing or texting would have been easier, because there was something about the physicality of it, the way their hands shaped meaning in the air between them, that felt essential. The farmer taught her about the land, about reading weather patterns and understanding animal behavior. She taught him about her world, about deaf culture, and the ways she'd learned to navigate spaces that weren't designed for her. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's silences, and slowly, inevitably, they fell in love. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was gradual, built on morning coffee shared in comfortable quiet and evening conversations signed by firelight. It was the way she laughed, silent but full-bodied, her whole face lighting up. It was the way he looked at her when she wasn't watching, with a tenderness that surprised him. It was the way they could communicate across a crowded room with just a glance, a subtle gesture. One evening in early December, as they sat together on the couch with her feet tucked under his leg and his arm around her shoulders, she turned to face him. I need to tell you something, she signed, his heart clenched with sudden fear. What is it? I'm falling in love with you. Or maybe I've already fallen. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately. And it scares me because I've never felt this way before. This understood, this seen, this accepted for exactly who I am. The farmer felt his throat tighten with emotion. He set down the book he'd been reading and took both her hands in his, holding them gently. I love you too, he signed, the movement simple but weighted with truth. I didn't think I'd ever find someone who understood what I needed, who appreciated silence the way I do, who could communicate with me in ways that matter more than words ever could. Are you sure? She signed, and he could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear of hoping for too much. Because I come with complications. I'll always be deaf. I'll always need accommodations. I'll always be different from what most people expect. He cupped her face gently, making sure she was looking directly at him. You are exactly what I've been looking for, he signed, each gesture slow and emphatic. Not despite who you are, but because of it. You've reminded me what real communication looks like, what it means to be truly present with another person, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled him close, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her tightly, feeling her silent sobs against his chest, and understood that she was releasing years of feeling misunderstood, years of being treated as less than, years of loneliness that mirrored his own. When she finally pulled back, she signed with shaking hands. Will you teach me about farming? Really teach me. I want to understand your world the way you've tried to understand mine. I'd love nothing more. The spring brought new life to the land and to their relationship. Claire moved in gradually, her presence transforming the house from a bachelor's space into a home. She brought color and warmth, plants and artwork, a feminine energy that had been missing for too long. But more than that, she brought laughter and companionship, someone to share meals with and make plans with and build a future with. They worked the land together, Claire learning to drive the tractor and mend fences and recognize when the cows needed attention. She was a quick study, approaching everything with curiosity and determination. And the farmer loved teaching her, loved seeing his world through her fresh eyes. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch and sign to each other in the fading light, their hands creating poetry in the air. They talked about everything, past hurts and future hopes, fears and dreams, the small daily details that made up a life. And sometimes, they'd sit in perfect silence, just being together, and the farmer would think about how silence had once felt like loneliness, but now felt like love. One evening in late May, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, the farmer took Claire's hand and held it gently. When she looked at him curious, he signed a question he'd been carrying for weeks. "Will you marry me?" Claire's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and joy. Then she was nodding, signing, "Yes, yes, yes," over and over, laughing silently, crying, pulling him close. "I love you," she signed against his chest. "I love you too." He signed back, even though she couldn't see his hands. But somehow, he knew she felt it anyway. They were married in June, a small ceremony in the backyard with just close friends, and a minister who'd learned basic sign language specifically for the occasion. Claire wore a simple white dress and wildflowers in her hair, and the farmer wore his father's suit, carefully preserved and still fitting perfectly. The vows were signed, each word deliberate and beautiful, witnessed by people who'd learned to appreciate the elegance of this silent language. And when they were pronounced married, when the farmer kissed his bride in the golden afternoon light, he understood what his brother had tried to tell him all those years ago. That love wasn't about hearing the right words, it was about feeling them, about choosing every day to show up, to pay attention, to communicate in whatever language worked best, about understanding that silence could be full of meaning, and that sometimes the most profound connections happened without a single sound. The years that followed were rich and full. They expanded the farm, adding a small orchard and a greenhouse where Claire grew herbs and flowers. They hosted gatherings for the deaf community in the county, creating a space where people could come and feel understood. They taught sign language classes at the community center, spreading awareness and building bridges. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, the farmer would watch Claire working in the garden, her hands dirty and her face content, and he'd remember that day in the coffee shop. The way she'd looked so alone, so defeated. The way one simple gesture, "Can I help?" had changed both their lives. He'd learned from his brother that everyone deserves to be understood. That communication requires effort and attention and love. And Claire had reminded him that connection was worth fighting for, that loneliness didn't have to be permanent, that sometimes all it took was one person willing to meet you in your language instead of demanding you speak theirs. Now sitting on the porch with Claire beside him, her hand in his, watching the sun set over the land they'd built together, the farmer felt a gratitude so profound it ached. For the brother who'd taught him to see beyond sound, for the woman who'd walked into that coffee shop on a difficult morning, for his own willingness to step forward when he could have walked away, for every small choice that had led to this moment, this life, this love. Claire squeezed his hand and signed, "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am," he signed back. "How everything I needed was waiting in a place I almost didn't go." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "We found each other. That's all that matters." And he understood that she was right. In a world full of noise and chaos, they'd found each other in the silence. And they'd built something beautiful there, a language all their own, a love that needed no translation, a home that was finally perfectly complete. 20 years had passed since that morning in the coffee shop, and the farmer, though everyone still called him that, was 70 now, his hair silver, his hands marked by decades of work but still steady, still strong. The farm had changed, evolved into something neither he nor Claire could have imagined that first day. What had been a solitary man's operation had become a thriving community hub, a place where deaf and hearing people worked side by side, where communication happened in multiple languages, where silence was respected as much as sound. They'd built 3 small cottages on the back portion of the property, renting them to deaf individuals transitioning from the city to rural life, offering them the same peace and acceptance Claire had found here. The main house had been expanded with wide windows that let in natural light, essential for sign language conversations, and an open floor plan that allowed visual communication from room to room. Their daughter, Lily, now 17, moved between both worlds with the fluid grace of someone who'd never known division. She was a coda, child of deaf adults, though only Claire was deaf. The farmer had raised her bilingual in English and ASL, and she'd grown into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman who wanted to study deaf education in college. On this particular evening, a Saturday in late September, the farm was full of people. It was their annual harvest celebration, a tradition they'd started 15 years ago. Long tables were set up in the yard, laden with food that various guests had brought. Children ran through the grass, their laughter mixing with the visual conversations happening in clusters around the property. The farmer stood on the porch, watching it all with quiet satisfaction. Claire appeared beside him, her arm slipping naturally around his waist. She'd aged beautifully, her face lined with laugh lines, her eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. "Look what we built." She signed with one hand, the other still holding him close. He nodded, feeling emotion rise in his throat the way it often did these days. Getting older had made him more tender, more aware of how precious every moment was. "I was just thinking," he signed back, "about that day in the coffee shop, how close I came to leaving, how different everything would be if I had." Claire smiled, that same smile that had captivated him 2 decades ago. "But you didn't leave. You stayed. You saw me." "I saw someone who needed help. I didn't know I was seeing my future." "Neither did I." She paused, her hands moving slowly. "Do you remember what you told me that first day on the porch, about silence not being empty?" "I do." "You were right, but you taught me something else too. You taught me that silence can be shared, that it's not about being alone, it's about being understood, and you've understood me every single day since." The farmer pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. Around them the party continued, conversations in sign language and spoken English overlapping, creating a tapestry of communication that would have seemed impossible to him 50 years ago when his brother was alive, when their family was still learning what it meant to bridge 2 worlds. Lily came bounding up the porch steps, signing excitedly about something one of the younger children had said. She was fluent, effortless, her hands painting pictures in the air as she spoke. The farmer watched his daughter with pride, understanding that she represented something important, proof that different languages, different ways of being, could coexist beautifully. "Dad," Lily signed, switching to include her mother, Mrs. "Peterson wants to know if you'll teach her signing next month. She says she's tired of not being able to talk to Claire at these gatherings." "Tell her yes," Claire signed. Always yes. As Lily ran off to deliver the message, the farmer thought about all the people they'd taught over the years. Hundreds, maybe thousands, who'd learned at least basic sign language because of their classes, their advocacy, their simple insistence that communication was worth the effort. His brother would have been proud. His parents would have been amazed. And he was simply grateful. "You know what I love most?" He signed to Claire as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting everything golden. "What?" "That we built this together. That what started as me helping you in a coffee shop became a partnership, a mission, a life that's touched so many people." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You gave me more than help that day. You gave me hope. You showed me that I wasn't too much, wasn't too difficult, wasn't less than. You showed me I was exactly enough. You were always enough." He signed firmly. "I just had the privilege of being the one who could tell you so." They stood together as the evening deepened, watching their community, because that's what it had become, share food and stories and laughter. The farmer thought about loneliness, about how it had once been his constant companion, how he'd almost accepted it as his permanent state. And then Claire had walked into his life, or rather, he'd walked into hers at exactly the right moment. One gesture, one offer of help, one willingness to communicate in someone else's language. That's all it had taken to change everything. Now surrounded by the fruits of that single choice, this farm, this family, this community of people who'd learned that difference wasn't a barrier but a bridge. The farmer understood what his father had tried to teach him about legacy. It wasn't about the land you left behind or the money in the bank. It was about the lives you touched, the connections you fostered, the love you shared freely and without condition. He'd lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with meaning and purpose. And it had all started with seeing someone who needed to be seen, hearing someone who communicated without sound, reaching out when he could have walked away. "I love you." He signed to Claire, the movements as natural as breathing after 20 years of practice. "I love you too," she signed back. "Thank you for understanding me, for seeing me, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for teaching me that silence could be full of love." They kissed as the sun set, their hands still entwined, their community celebrating around them, their daughter's laughter carrying across the yard, and the farmer thought this is what it means to be truly heard, to truly belong, to find your person in an unexpected place and build something beautiful from that first fragile connection. Some people spend their whole lives searching for understanding. He'd found it in a crowded coffee shop on a Thursday morning, offered through a simple gesture accepted with grateful tears. And every day since had been a gift, one he'd never take for granted, one he'd cherish until his last breath. Because love, real love, wasn't about perfection or ease. It was about showing up, paying attention, speaking each other's language, and building a home in the space between words where understanding lived. That was the life they'd made, and it was more than enough. It was everything. What did you think of this story? Would you have made the same choice to reach out? Leave your sincere thoughts below, and if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your presence here means the world.